Okay, if people can take their seats, that would be wonderful. And we'll begin. Well, can I thank you all very much for coming and welcoming you to King's this evening. Before I go any further, can I just ask that you all make sure your mobile phones are turned off? We don't want you embarrassed in front of everybody. And actually, before I say anything, I really want to thank two people who've made this event possible. That's Alicia Delacour from the International State Crime Initiative. Alicia has been superb. And Gemma Noyce, who isn't here this evening, did an awful lot of preparation beforehand. She's from the law school. And I have to say, Fatima, thank you so much. You've done a wonderful job this evening. So thank you all. And as I said, it's a real pleasure to welcome you all here this evening for this event that's jointly organised by the International State Crime Initiative, which is based here at King's College, and the Free Ali Aarrass campaign. Tonight, we are exploring the impact of the global war on terror on two men in particular and their families. Ali Aarrass, who's currently in a Moroccan jail, and Talha Ahsan, who, as a lot of people here will know, is in a supermax prison in the United States. But it's not just the story of these two men, it's also the story of their families and the campaigns which have grown up around these two men. And we're delighted to welcome family members of both men in the audience tonight. We have Hamja Ahsan, Talha's father. We have Farida Aarrass, and I think Farida's daughter. And so it's really wonderful that we have family members here, and it's terrific to have this level of support for the campaigns. We will be screening two films this evening. Turab Shah's Extradition, which tells the story of Talha Ahsan's arrest in the UK, his extradition, and his detention in a US supermax prison. And we have Mohamed Ouachen's Ali Aarrass, pour exemple. And Mohamed's film explores the arrest, illegal extradition, and torture of Belgian national Ali Aarrass. I'm delighted to welcome both directors. They're both in the audience tonight. They won't be speaking, but I'm sure if anybody has questions of them after, they will be around to answer them. Now, the way the evening will be structured is that we will begin by screening the two films. We will start with the film about Talha Ahsan and follow that with the film about Ali Aarrass. I'll then ask each of our panellists, we've got a number and I'll introduce them in a moment, to speak briefly before opening the proceedings up for questions. I was going to say and contributions, but time is limited, and I would really prefer that you were asking questions of the panel rather than making any kind of lengthy contribution. So please bear that in mind. And we are very fortunate to have on the panel this evening Farida Aarrass, Hamja Ahsan, and Luk Vervaet from Belgium, and Arun Kundnani from the US these days. Luk Vervaet is a tireless campaigner and founder of the Ali Aarrass campaign. He's also a tireless campaigner against injustices of the prison system and the criminal justice system in Belgium. And this campaigning led to Luk's banning. I mean, he's been banned from working in his normal job as a teacher inside prisons in Belgium. Arun is a writer and human rights activist, recently completing an Open Society Foundation fellowship. Arun's new book, The Muslims Are Coming, The New Politics of Anti-Extremism, will be published this year, later this year, hopefully soon. Who's the publisher, Arun? Verso, by Verso Press. So look out for that. It's a great title. And Arun will speak specifically about securitization in the US, particularly post the Boston bombings. Luk will speak about the Ali Aarrass campaign and the conditions which have led to Ali Aarrass's treatment in Morocco. We will then, as I said, open it up for questions and contribution, but finally I'll ask Liz Fakiti from the Institute of Race Relations, but also from the Free Ali Aarrass, the London Friends of Ali Aarrass campaign, to wind up. So without any further ado, I think we should begin the screenings. So thank you all very much. The screenings will last approximately 1 hour. We're in here until around 8:30, but there may be some wriggle room just after. So I think we can begin. Thank you.
Ali Aarrass est un citoyen belge, donc il est un binational belgo-marocain qui a donc depuis le week-end dernier 50 ans, qui en 2005 est parti vivre à Melilla, la petite enclave espagnole du nord du Maroc où nous sommes natifs, et qui a été appréhendé une première fois en 2006, novembre 2006, libéré 4 jours après sous caution, appréhendé de nouveau le 1er avril 2008 à la demande du Maroc, qui a été mis en détention à Madrid, d'où il a été extradé le 14 décembre 2010 au Maroc. Et cela malgré qu'il avait été jugé en Espagne, déclaré innocent. Il a été torturé pendant 12 jours de garde à vue. Ensuite, il a été donc placé en détention à la prison de Salé, au pavillon de la ville de Salé au Maroc.
Je me rappelle avoir vu ma mère au téléphone, et puis voilà, c'était un choc, la panique. Elle appelle ma mère, enfin ma mère pas directement, ma grand-mère je veux dire. Elle appelle sa femme, elle appelle ma tante pour avoir un peu des nouvelles, etc. Puis directement elle appelle le ministère des Affaires étrangères, elle harcèle pour avoir des réponses. Et je pense qu'on était très très loin de se douter que ça irait si loin et que ça prendrait une telle ampleur en fait.
Donc Molenbeekois, Ali gérait une librairie rue de l'École, et à ce titre, c'était quelqu'un d'extrêmement connu dans son quartier et dans la commune. C'est quelqu'un qui avait une image vraiment très positive au sein de la population. Et qui avait un engagement sur le terrain social très important.
C'était quelqu'un d'extrêmement calme, extrêmement généreux. Il haussait jamais la voix, c'était quelqu'un de très 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 honnête, très apprécié. Et donc, que ce soit au marché ou que ce soit dans le quartier à Bruxelles, tout le monde était unanime pour dire qu'Ali Aarrass c'était une crème.
Ce qui est vraiment étonnant chez Ali, c'est que je me dis, mon Dieu, qu'est-ce qu'il est fort, mais je suis vraiment subjuguée par cette force de caractère, parce que malgré tout ce qu'il a enduré, mon Dieu, et injustement, chaque fois qu'il nous raconte un fait qui va nous attrister, parce que nous on pose des questions, on a envie de savoir ce qu'il en est, ou ce qui s'est passé, et c'est grâce justement à toutes ces questions et réponses que j'ai pu rédiger et apporter des informations aux différentes personnes qui le soutiennent. Il sait qu'à un moment donné, on est mal, et alors il va changer complètement d'attitude et nous raconter quelque chose qui va nous faire rire, ou nous rappeler des souvenirs anciens pour mettre une autre ambiance en jeu. Et je le regarde, et il y a des passages où on ne parle pas, où on se regarde les yeux dans les yeux, et ça veut tout dire, quoi. C'est très difficile, hein.
En admettant, ils l'ont arrêté au Maroc, en admettant qu'il a été extradé d'une manière injuste, en admettant tout cela, d'abord il faut savoir, il y a des conditions à respecter. Son procès n'a pas été équitable. Le gars a été torturé, le gars a été malmené, il n'a pas eu tous les droits, etc. etc.
J'ai parlé avec une femme dont le mari a été aussi impliqué dans le procès Belligrage, parce qu'il s'agit de ça. Elle dit... Nous, on ne sait pas pourquoi mon mari est dedans. Dans ce procès se retrouvent des gens de différentes villes, même de différents pays, qui ne se connaissent pas entre eux, mais qui tout d'un coup se trouvent ensemble dans un procès et on ne sait pas pour quelle raison, parce qu'il n'y a pas de lien entre ces gens, ils se trouvent tous là ensemble. Et donc, le cas d'Ali, c'est une illustration de ça.
Ali Aarrass, son affaire, on peut la ranger, si on peut dire, dans le cadre de ce qu'on appelle la lutte contre le terrorisme, qui est en fait un ensemble de procès. Dans la plupart des procès, c'est des procès inéquitables, où il n'y a pas de preuves, où les droits des accusés ne sont pas garantis, où les normes et les conditions d'un procès équitable ne sont pas respectées.
On accuse Ali Aarrass de rien du tout, de plein de choses, mais sur aucun élément matériel. Il est accusé d'association terroriste ou d'association de malfaiteurs. Ali Aarrass, au tribunal, il a dit que la seule association de laquelle il faisait partie, c'était sa famille.
Mais vu tout ce qui s'est passé évidemment au Maroc depuis le début, c'est-à-dire la torture, c'est-à-dire une instruction qui a duré 2 mois et demi avant que Ali soit renvoyé devant la cour d'appel de Rabat qui siégeait en première instance, qui a refusé de prendre en considération l'ensemble de nos arguments, notamment ceux liés à la torture, qui a condamné Ali sur la seule base des aveux qui ont été extorqués sur la torture, et alors même qu'Ali Aarrass à la barre, à l'audience, a dit ces aveux ont été obtenus sur la torture, et maintenant je vais vous dire la vérité, et la vérité c'est que je ne sais pas de quoi on m'accuse, je n'ai jamais transporté d'armes au Maroc, je ne connais pas M. Belligrage ou M. Benjetou. Et donc malgré le fait qu'il soit revenu sur ces prétendus aveux, il a été condamné à 15 ans d'emprisonnement, ce qui est une peine extrêmement lourde.
Comment est-ce qu'on peut laisser quelqu'un se faire torturer dans un autre pays lorsqu'on sait pertinemment bien qu'il s'est fait torturer, lorsque tous les rapports de toutes les ONG les plus irréprochables que ce soit le montrent de manière tangible? Comment ne peut-on rien faire?
Comment est-ce possible qu'on puisse, avec autant de facilité, amener quelqu'un à la torture, tout en sachant qu'il est innocent?
Alors, ce qui est bien aussi, c'est que donc, la cour, elle ne peut plus changer maintenant. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, aussi étrange que ça puisse paraître, c'était aujourd'hui l'ouverture du dossier en appel d'Ali Aarrass. À partir du moment où ils disent « Vous êtes bien Ali Aarrass, né à telle date, à tel pays, résident à telle adresse, et détenu à Salé 2, accusé de », ça c'est l'ouverture du dossier.
Les autres audiences,
et donc en fait les autres audiences, on discutait sur le dossier, est-il prêt, est-ce qu'on est prêt, est-ce que la date est bonne, est-ce qu'il y a toutes les pièces. Nous on demandait des pièces, l'avocat général ne voulait pas les transmettre et tout. Parce que sinon ils n'auraient pas pu changer de magistrat. Hein. Les magistrats, à partir du moment où le dossier est ouvert, alors c'est un peu bizarre c'est vrai, mais à partir du moment où le dossier est ouvert, les magistrats doivent rester les mêmes. Les magistrats du siège, le parquet peut toujours changer, c'est la loi.
Les résultats de l'enquête menée par la police judiciaire, ainsi que le bilan d'expertise, ils ont dit voilà, on a tout fait, donc il n'y a pas, ce sont des allégations, etc. Malheureusement, c'est ça le problème. Ils ne refusent pas le principe, mais ils essaient toujours de manipuler la procédure. Voilà. de point de vue formel, on a tout fait. On a entendu Ali, on a fait l'expertise, les examens médicaux. Donc il n'y a rien, ce sont des allégations. Mais sur le fond, il n'y a rien qui a été fait. Comment peut-on imaginer faire une expertise sur la base des dires et des constats? Voilà, moi je suis médecin, je constate et il n'y a rien. C'est pas un examen. Ce qu'on demande, c'est une expertise professionnelle.
Les premiers contacts avec Ali Aarrass en fait étaient indirects, puisque au début on intervient dans ce dossier avec Maître Alamat et Maître Marchand comme des avocats belges, donc des avocats étrangers qui ne peuvent pas directement agir dans la procédure marocaine, et donc c'est via un avocat marocain qui lui va avoir rencontré Ali Aarrass à la sortie de ces 12 jours de torture devant un juge d'instruction, et c'est Maître Larsen Datsi qui va nous donner les premières informations. Et c'est par ce biais-là qu'on va savoir que Ali Aarrass a été torturé, qu'il est maintenant détenu, qu'on sait où il est, qu'une enquête est censée se poursuivre et que, la procédure marocaine a véritablement commencé. En mars 2011 qu'a lieu la première audience pour ouvrir son dossier et son procès devant la cour d'appel de Rabat. Et là, on découvre un homme de loin. Il est dans la salle derrière une vitre en plexiglas. Les avocats et le public ne peuvent pas l'approcher. Et en tant qu'avocat belge, à ce moment-là, il ne nous est même pas possible de venir à la barre à côté de lui quand il vient témoigner. Donc on le voit de loin, on voit son visage, on voit un homme qui a l'air solide, qui montre qu'il a résisté et qu'il résiste encore, qui montre un immense courage, qui manifestement veut faire face à ses juges, ne veut pas se défiler, qui porte peut-être encore les stigmates de sa torture, mais plus au niveau comportemental. Il n'a plus à ce moment-là le visage marqué, mais on voit qu'il cherche à se battre.
Ça ne l'a pas empêché de quand même déposer une plainte contre la torture. C'était un risque parce qu'il s'expose à nouveau, hein, donc il l'a quand même fait parce qu'il réclame la vérité. C'est quelqu'un qui dit « je suis innocent ». Et je me battrai jusqu'au bout pour réclamer cette innocence.
C'est formel, tout est prêt d'avance, tous les jugements, c'est-à-dire les peines sont prêtes d'avance, c'est du cinéma. On n'entend pas la défense, on ne prend pas en charge, c'est-à-dire on prend en charge juste les PV signés sous la torture. Donc c'est une justice qui est vraiment en faillite au Maroc, et c'est comme ça que ça s'est passé dans la majorité des cas. C'est pour ça que nous nous appelons toujours soit à refaire les procès des gens qui sont arrêtés dans le cadre du terrorisme et leur garantir leur droit à un procès équitable, soit de les libérer parce qu'ils sont tous innocents, puisque toute personne est innocente tant qu'il n'y a pas de preuves et de jugement équitable dans toutes ces étapes.
La collaboration entre les services d'enseignement et de notoriété publique, tout le monde sait que le bagne de Temara a servi de lieu de torture pour les gens où la CIA a exercé la torture, grâce aux Marocains. Donc il n'y a rien de nouveau sous le soleil d'Allah. Dès que le mot terrorisme est prononcé, n'existe plus le droit.
Dès qu'il y a cet aspect religieux, il y a déjà aussi, ici en Europe, la moitié ou la trois quarts qui tournent le dos. Parce que, oui, on n'aime pas. Et on est éduqué depuis une décennie que islam égale terrorisme. Et donc, c'est très difficile pour les familles de se faire entendre parce que tout ce climat islamophobe, il est là. Et en plus, on le lie au terrorisme. Donc, c'est très difficile à se faire entendre. Et heureusement qu'à travers la campagne Ali, on a réussi à se faire entendre, je trouve, et donc pour moi c'est une percée à ce niveau-là.
Passeport espagnol, il a été obligé de faire son passeport à l'ambassade du Maroc. Conclusion, il a la double nationalité, alors qu'il n'a jamais mis un pied au Maroc. Et donc là-bas, il est considéré comme marocain. Il a été condamné à 15 ans de prison, sans preuve. C'était un procès inique. Et là, il est en appel. Et aujourd'hui, c'est son anniversaire, il a 50 ans. Et voilà, c'est pour ça qu'on est là, on ne lâche pas l'affaire. Voilà, c'est ça. On va parfois devant l'ambassade du Maroc.
Ali Aarrass est innocent. Libération immédiate. Ali Aarrass est innocent. Libération immédiate. Ali Aarrass est innocent. Libération immédiate. Ali Aarrass est innocent. Libération.
Notre gouvernement belge, on espérait qu'il ferait quelque chose en fait pour minimum faire bouger les choses, pour nous montrer que voilà, ils s'intéressent à ce qui se passe et qu'ils vont mettre leur petit grain de sel pour faire évoluer la situation, mais rien du tout.
Comme convenu, je vous confirme que la position de ce département en matière d'aide consulaire aux bipatrides est de ne pas intervenir auprès des autorités locales du pays de leur autre nationalité. Et donc il dit que ce principe est appliqué pour toutes les situations consulaires rencontrées, qu'il s'agisse de problèmes de nationalité ou de problèmes de détention. Or, il ne s'agit pas d'un problème de nationalité ou de détention, il s'agit d'un problème d'un homme qui se fait torturer alors même qu'un des juges les plus rigoureux qui soit en Europe, le juge Balthazar Garzon, n'a rien pu mettre à charge d'Ali Aarrass et a adressé un non-lieu. Comme votre frère est considéré comme de nationalité marocaine par les autorités marocaines, nos services ne les contacteront donc pas pour votre frère. C'est le mail adressé par le service public fédéral des affaires étrangères à Farida Aarrass. Il faut rappeler ici qu'il y a une convention qui interdit d'envoyer un détenu vers un pays où l'on sait que l'on torture. Les pays européens l'ont signé, l'Espagne l'a signé. Donc, quand l'Espagne prend la décision d'extrader un détenu vers le Maroc, il va à l'encontre d'un principe élémentaire, d'une charte qu'il a signée. Le fait que ça passe dans l'opinion, que ça passe d'une manière ou d'une autre, montre à quel point la situation est dangereuse.
Est-ce que mon frère n'avait pas servi de monnaie d'échange? Est-ce qu'il n'aurait pas servi de moyen d'améliorer les relations entre ces différents États qu'est l'Espagne et la Belgique, l'Espagne, l'Espagne, le Maroc, la Belgique, le Maroc, la Belgique? Donc c'était quand même assez vicieux et nous l'avons vécu. Mon frère en a fait les frais. Aujourd'hui, la situation elle est très claire.
Et à ce moment-là, on m'avait expliqué que dans le cadre des accords européens, dans le cadre de la confiance mutuelle qui régnait entre les États membres de l'Union européenne, État démocratique qu'est l'Espagne, on pouvait faire confiance à la justice espagnole. Ceci dit, entre-temps, la justice espagnole a rendu un avis blanchissant M. Ali Aarrass, mais chose qui m'avait choqué à l'époque, c'est qu'en tant que citoyen belge, on l'avait livré aux autorités marocaines, alors que les autorités espagnoles s'étaient prononcées de manière très claire pour dire qu'Ali Aarrass, on n'avait rien à lui reprocher dans le dossier qu'on avait ouvert à son encontre.
Plus perturbant, c'est qu'il a été extradé sous un gouvernement socialiste, hein. Avec Zapatero. C'est ça qui est absolument... L'Espagne, là aussi, elle viole le droit. Elle viole le droit européen, elle viole tous les principes même du droit.
Quand un comité des droits de l'homme de l'ONU vous demande de ne pas extrader quelqu'un parce qu'il y a risque de torture, en principe, tous les pays, ils appliquent ce que ce comité leur demande. Eh bien, l'Espagne n'a pas fait et donc elle a fait infraction à ce qui est reconnu internationalement comme règle de comportement d'un pays démocratique.
Au niveau international, il y a 2 recours qui sont introduits et on espère vraiment obtenir gain de cause. C'est un recours contre l'Espagne. L'Espagne n'avait pas le droit d'extrader Ali Aarrass au Maroc et on attend d'obtenir une décision du Comité des droits de l'homme qui devrait aller dans notre sens puisque l'Espagne a violé la demande faite par le Comité des droits de l'homme de ne pas extrader Ali Aarrass. Et puis alors il y a une demande qui est introduite auprès du Comité contre la torture des Nations Unies contre le Maroc parce qu'il n'y a aucune enquête qui est faite sur les allégations de torture et que plus le temps passe en fait, plus il deviendra difficile d'obtenir la preuve qu'Ali a été torturé En tout cas, si on ne permet pas à des médecins spécialisés en matière d'évaluation des séquelles de la torture d'avoir accès à Ali Aarrass, de pouvoir discuter avec lui, de pouvoir l'examiner, de pouvoir pratiquer des examens complémentaires, pas simplement regarder s'il a un bleu ou s'il a une trace de coup, mais vraiment faire des examens plus approfondis. Est-ce que l'Espagne s'est dit, pour sauver le jeune homme qui était dans la même situation et qui était hispano-marocain, on va faire un petit plaisir au Maroc et envoyer le belgo-marocain? Je n'en sais rien, mais en tout cas, la Belgique n'avait pas l'air de beaucoup se préoccuper de son ressortissant, et donc pour l'Espagne, ça ne devait pas être un grand cas de conscience que de l'envoyer, et pourtant, ils savaient que la situation au Maroc était tendue.
S'il était un Belge d'origine belge, ils auraient remué ciel et terre. Donc même les gouvernements occidentaux, il n'y a rien de nouveau. Ils ont une deux poids deux mesures. Que l'on se rappelle le cas de ce franco-palestinien qui est resté je ne sais pas combien de temps arrêté en Palestine, et jamais le gouvernement français n'a bougé, alors que pour Elad Shalat, et la famille a été reçue par Sarkozy. Sarkozy, à chaque fois qu'il discutait, la France se mobilisait pour sa libération, alors que pour le franco-palestinien, rien à faire, ils n'ont rien fait pour lui.
Il y a un racisme d'État qui fait que quelqu'un qui s'appelle Mohamed ou qui s'appelle Ali n'est pas traité de la même manière que quelqu'un qui s'appelle Yann ou Pete ou Jean ou Pierre.
Et au final, aujourd'hui, à l'heure actuelle, je me dis que je ne soutiens pas Ali Aarrass. En fait, Ali Aarrass, il est un phare qui me montre ma propre condition de belgo-marocain. J'étais trop jeune pour m'en rappeler, mais avec toutes les lectures ou toutes les vidéos que j'ai vues, la double peine, elle a été soutenue par tous les mouvements de gauche et tout le mouvement associatif pour se battre contre la double peine. Et en fait, la double peine n'existe plus, mais je me suis rendu compte, oui, la double peine existe toujours pour les belgo-marocains.
Les premiers à être concernés par cette question de la double nationalité, c'est-à-dire les belgo-marocains ou les belgo-turcs ou les belgo-albanais, etc., doivent absolument se saisir de cette question-là. Il ne s'agit pas d'attendre que les politiques se penchent sur ça et essaient de trouver des solutions. Il s'agit de faire un rapport de force chez nous en tant que citoyens. C'est-à-dire, c'est arrivé à Ali Aarrass, c'est un innocent, ça peut arriver à moi, ça peut arriver à mon frère, à ma soeur, à mon père.
Et les responsables occidentaux, les gouvernements occidentaux, savent que jamais ils auront des problèmes avec les gouvernements arabes. Si les gouvernements arabes défendaient leurs citoyens, ce serait autre chose. Ils ne peuvent pas se permettre, par exemple, le gouvernement belge ou le gouvernement français ne peut pas se permettre un tel comportement avec un citoyen américain. Impossible, un citoyen canadien, parce qu'ils savent que les gouvernements canadiens et américains vont remuer ciel et terre pour défendre leurs citoyens. D'ailleurs, ils savent que le gouvernement marocain, par exemple, ou le gouvernement arabe, s'en foutent éperdument de leurs citoyens.
Tout le monde en Occident, ou toutes les personnes en Occident qui avaient à voir ou qui étaient suspects de terrorisme, l'Occident, les pays occidentaux, et en tout cas la Belgique, ils ont eu la politique de vouloir s'en débarrasser. Et le plus loin qu'ils étaient, le mieux c'était. Donc c'est une des raisons de fond pour laquelle, pour moi, les pays occidentaux, et dans ce cas précis la Belgique, ne s'est jamais voulu mobiliser pour ces personnes qui étaient quand même des belgo-marocains, qui étaient aussi belges que moi, mais qui avaient le malheur d'être liés à cette nationalité et à cette question de terrorisme.
Ce problème d'impunité qui est toujours là, qui est un obstacle en fait au changement. Et c'est pour ça donc que les choses ne peuvent changer que lorsqu'on aura une vraie constitution démocratique où il y a une vraie séparation des pouvoirs, où le peuple marocain peut avoir accès au droit à l'autodétermination comme il est stipulé dans le pacte international des droits civils et politiques et le pacte international des droits économiques, sociaux et culturels.
Il faut des réponses sur la question de la torture. Donc il y a une plainte d'Ali, il y a une plainte qui est signée par un nombre d'organisations des droits de l'homme, qui se trouve à Genève, qui est adressé au Maroc. Les parlementaires demandent des réponses à ce sujet-là. Deuxièmement, ils demandent des comptes sur le fait que Ali n'a pas eu droit à un procès équitable. Et donc, je vous garantis que quand j'ai entendu le verdict, on était là, mais c'est comme s'il n'y avait pas eu de procès avant. Hein. Donc, tu as eu des heures de plaidoirie, mais donc c'est comme s'il n'y avait rien qui était dit. C'est comme s'ils sortaient une petite carte en dessous de leur bureau en disant « Ah oui, c'est 15 ans, ben, c'est 15 ans ». Donc, il n'y a aucun réflexe, aucune réflexion, aucun échange d'arguments et d'un jugement sur base de preuves. Hein. Et donc, là-dessus aussi, on demande des explications.
Ali a pris 15 ans. J'ai pris un coup, mais je me suis très vite réveillé et j'ai donné un coup de fil à Farida. Et je lui ai dit, Ali, il ne purgera jamais 15 ans. Pour une simple raison, ce régime marocain ne tiendra pas 15 ans. Que ce soit en Tunisie, en Égypte, en Libye, en Syrie, dans toutes ces dictatures arabes, et il n'y en a aucune qui fait exception pour moi. Toutes ces manifestations dénoncent les violences policières, la torture, systématiquement. Donc Ali Aarrass, il n'est qu'un élément de ce système dictatorial au Maroc où la torture fait partie du système. Et mon optimisme vient pour Ali Aarrass, que j'espère voir le plus rapidement possible et qui rejoigne sa famille.
J'ai partagé 2 heures avec mon frère, je l'ai tenu par la main. C'était des moments d'une intensité incroyable. On a échangé un regard pendant des moments de silence où le silence en disait énormément. Lui était très optimiste et le fait qu'il soit si optimiste m'a reboosté, ça m'a donné du punch. Je suis, on ne peut vraiment plus heureuse de l'avoir vu. Je ne m'attendais pas à ce qu'en sortant de là, je me sente comme sur un nuage, je flotte. Et tout le monde me le fait remarquer, me dit tu es très souriante, je pleure encore mais c'est de joie.
Ali Aarrass, il fait partie de ce mouvement, tout seul, avec ses simples moyens, avec sa personnalité, sa profession de simple ouvrier, qui est maltraité, qui a été torturé, oui, mais qui est pour moi, deviendra, malgré lui, si vous voulez, un symbole de toute cette force populaire.
I actually went to a Free Babar Ahmad protest outside one of the courts. It was quite a fairly large one, and I went because I thought next it could be my brother, and then it was him. My brother was there too.
5 years ago, they brought me to a cell. And ever since, a waiting game plays here, as they decide on sending me away. My parents grow so grey and sad at home. How will they manage visiting me there? Or must they wait until the end of time? Ma, hear my oath. By him whose hand is time, bars stand in worship with me in this cell. So even if I'm extradited there, and taken from my humble parents' home, tell them paradise is our true home, whose gardens years will never fade away. The poems I just read were by Sayyid Talha Ahsan. He's an individual who was a prominent campaigner a few years ago, especially campaigning for the rights of people like Mozambique, who were detained without trial in Guantanamo Bay. And as part of his campaign work, it seemed that he'd been arrested and put into detention within England without trial, and has remained so for over 5 years now. Perhaps they'll clean their hands of me once there, and then my country feels I'm wiped away.
Quite a distressing and humiliating experience. You know, I was just lying in my bed and, you know, police officers come in my house and I had to get undressed in front of them, and they go for every corner of my room and take photographs of every corner of my room. You know, I was just a lazy student. And bizarrely, you know, they asked questions like, do you have any Qurans in the room? And it was just strange. I just thought it felt a bit like a movie or what you hear about so-called police states. I just found it bizarre. And by all at an American request, this search warrant, you know, it wasn't anything to do with British law. So it's funny how a foreign country could just come and invade my house like that.
When this house is searched, you know, the 15 and 20 police officers came in this house, and they came at about 9 and finished at about 12 in the night. They had an intention, if anything is suspicious or if he get anything, then they will arrest it. But they could not find anything out. You know, so each and every corner, from top to bottom.
The case began in the courts in the United Kingdom, and within those courts it was a matter of raising the arguments, the relatively limited number of arguments that exist to suggest that extradition to the United States would be wrong. But as the case has developed, a number of factors have become far clearer than they were originally. And the case is now, and has been for 4 years, before the European Court of Human Rights, which is and is preventing the United Kingdom from sending either of the men to the United States, while it considers whether to send them there would violate the prohibition on subjecting anyone to torture or cruel and inhuman treatment.
At 5 o'clock in the morning, the anti-terrorist police, they broke into his house of them, and they pulled him out of his bed and dragged him and tortured him, beat him, and taken him to the police station, all the way beating him up, face down, punching and kicking. And at one time he thought that he was going to die.
It was pretty extraordinary what happened to Babar Ahmad at his arrest. There is a perception nowadays that what happened in the bad old days when Irish defendants were beaten up to make false confessions, that those times have gone and there's far more monitoring of what happens in police stations. But this was a savage assault upon a defenceless man. And there was something going on there in the psyche of that search team, where they have been hyped up to believe, first of all, that this was an extremely dangerous person who was likely to be being caught in the middle of preparing for some extraordinary attack. But also, it had been done for a purpose. We've seen the briefing now, because Babar brought a successful civil action. There had to be disclosure of documents. We've seen the briefing. It was extraordinary. It was hyped up. It was like activating attack dogs. Why? Something very odd there. Who psyched up whom and why? Part of it is obviously on the basis of utterly false information. So where did it come from? Did it come from torture somewhere? Did it? It was happening in the end of '03, and you have to bear in mind that there were people Babar knew who were in Guantanamo, or were being held in prisons in Afghanistan, in Bagram, people he knew and was close to. So where did all this come from? It's very disturbing entry into the case, let alone how it continued.
The scars that he got, the physical scars may have gone, but the mental scars will stay with him for the rest of his life.
Theresa May, a minister at home, though feeble servant to her masters there, a solitary torture chamber cell to put me in, she'll simply say, away. So let me, while I can, devote my time to work for my own justice over here.
The context of the 2003 Extradition Act is essentially part of a very lopsided relationship between the United States of America and the rest of the world, and the United States of America, and particularly the UK. Post 9/11, the sort of disparity between the two in terms of geopolitical power was very much emphasised, and the United States, carrying with it this kind of momentum after 9/11, was able to really extract from its partners, if you like, in a kind of Western alliance or whatever you want to call it, all sorts of really quite outrageous concessions. Now, the Extradition Act has a lot of inbuilt injustice with regard to the relationship between two sovereign states. Forget about, you know, any racism or Islamophobia in it. And part of that injustice and imbalance is the fact that whilst the UK, should it wish to have somebody extradited to the UK, would need to provide all sorts of evidence of the charges, give what charges they were wanted on, and then provide evidence for them and submit them to relevant authorities in the US. No such criteria is required in reverse. Literally, the US snaps its fingers and says, we want X, and the UK has to send them. And this is where we're at. Nearly a decade later, actually 9 years later, in the United Kingdom, with several people waiting for extradition to the United States, and yet, you know, had they been guilty of a crime, they could have been charged in the United Kingdom. Really sufficient evidence, nothing with regard to what they're wanted for in detail is being provided from the other side. And many of them have spent years incarcerated, waiting to have appeals heard and so on, and trying to sort of fight this, the injustices of this act through the courts in the United Kingdom. Their lives, their youth in many cases, being wasted away.
And as the investigations have developed, it has become more and more clear that what America does to its prisoners is shocking beyond belief. In particular, the way in which it uses solitary confinement, extreme isolation, ostensibly as a security measure, but in fact to break the will and the spirit and the body of the prisoner. And so the evidence that we have been able to obtain with the help of those few American lawyers who fight the battle there is that if they were extradited to America, both of them would immediately go into solitary confinement. They're in prison here. That's bad enough, being in prison. But they would be in a cell, remain in a cell, not go out of the cell, not see anyone, not communicate with anybody save their lawyer until the trial. And that could last for 3 years on remand. And the successive evidence that we have is that those people who face that form of pre-trial detention effectively go mad. They don't do justice to themselves in any way.
It's a shame. I mean, it's what it's done to the family. It's I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's a permanent grief that embalms that home now. You know, so there's no respite for any member of that family. No respite at all, and there's incredible strength demonstrated by them, by the father, by the mother, by Hamja. So that's not, you know, that's not the pot of gold. That's not the silver lining. That's, you know, that's not to be. That's not a sweetener in any way. The fact that they're remaining strong. Their strength is a mark of their dignity, but the fact is that as a British citizen, first and foremost, all of us should be concerned about this case, because this is a British citizen we're talking about, for whom the British law doesn't apply. We have to ask why.
There's no normality in the life of anyone connected with it. Everyone's life is on hold. Everyone's life proceeds in the fear that even worse is going to happen. If Babar or Talha go to America, get locked up for life in isolation, that to everybody is the end. And so we never get to the end of the beginning. And Europe has taken 4 years, and it's very hard on everybody.
Even to this day, it all feels very unreal. It's just by basic logic, you know, why is he being held by a country he's never been to in a British prison? You know, it's sometimes even the reality of things just doesn't. Maybe because it's so traumatic, it just doesn't sink in. You just have to be hopeful and think he will be released, and because sometimes he describes solitary confinement in America and conditions of prison and supermax, and I just feel so disturbed by the descriptions, and I just go home feeling quite hurt and sad. And
we were a very, very happy family, but since Talha gone, we all are more or less sick, we are depressed, we are unhappy. So, and we always pray to Allah so that Talha can come back to us.
Of course, when we went to see him in the prison, that was terrible. And when slowly we got used to it, and then we were, you know, then we felt a bit strong, and then we gave him strength. And he's very calm, quiet type of a boy, and he used to, and still does, give strength to us. He said, please, and sometimes he would say to his mother, if you cry on the telephone, I won't talk to you, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm cracking.
You know, it sometimes causes me nightmares, actually. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have a nightmare of my brother in solitary confinement or being tortured, and it affects me quite badly, actually. It's affecting my, you know, I'd have to take time off school and I'd find it hard to work, and it sometimes made me feel quite, I tried to stay strong, but it's like the world's greatest superpower versus, you know, a rather frail Asian family.
We are affected very much. It's very, very difficult to explain, because we are a family. So if one person goes, so the family is not whole.
There are many interesting disparages and the kind of discrimination when it comes to not so much even the implementation of the Extradition Act, but the way it's perceived is really immense. You will see, for example, somebody like Gary McKinnon, who is also a victim of this law, who has Asperger's syndrome, who, if extradited, faces sort of imprisonment in a high security prison, possibly for the rest of his life. You know, we're talking about sort of, I don't know, decades being given as a sentence for a computer hacking charge. At the same time, you have someone like Talha Ahsan, whose story is very similar in many ways. You know, the fact that he has Asperger's syndrome is impactful on what it is he's being accused of doing. And yet the way he is perceived in the media, insofar as he is perceived even in the mainstream, and that's really very rarely, if at all, is markedly different. So even the way campaigners and the general public see people who are victims of this act is indicative of the kind of climate that we're living in. People are not really feeling sorry for Talha Ahsan because he has Asperger's syndrome and is a victim of an unjust law. They kind of tend to be going with the, well, there's no smoke without fire. He must have done something.
But, you know, Gary McKinnon's not Muslim and he's white, and so maybe he's seen, when Daily Mail says British justice for British citizens, maybe they have a more idea of what that is and what that excludes. I've put some of Talha's poetry in my exhibitions actually on the walls, and we also put it in the Islam Expo exhibition. I've often actually seen people cry in front of the poem, you know, which goes about faith in prison. Even Bruce Kent, who's a Catholic, you know, he just said this is the most moving poem about faith in prison.
I think this poem is about the awareness of the presence of God, and I just think there are very few people in any faith who can communicate as powerfully as this poem does.
A prisoner, on his knees, scrubs around a toilet bowl, and the bristles of the brush scuttle to and fro as a guard swaggers over, to yell rather than ask, "Where is your God now?" And the prisoner, still on his knees, his brush still cleaning, answers, "He's with me now, Gov. My God is with me now, hearing and seeing, whilst your superiors, when they see you, do not look at you, and when they hear you, do not listen to you. My God is risen above the heavens and closer to me than my jugular vein, whilst your superiors, no different to you, allow you no further than the desk. My God wants me to call him, whilst your superiors demand you knock. And when I go towards him a handspan, he comes to me a yard. And when I go to him walking, he comes to me running."
I feel very proud of his writing and work. It shows his sort of humanity and sensitivity, and you know, media is always trying to demonise and dehumanise what are victims of the war and terror campaign. And if you read it, you can just see how other side.
I would be unbelievably disappointed if the European Court of Human Rights says that it is fine to send any human being to the conditions that they would face in America, and it would send out a bad message to the rest of the world to think that Europe says this is okay. I don't know. There is a new factor now that we only just have found out, and that is the way in which the police manipulated the evidence so that the prosecution here didn't see it. So this is a new round of fighting, and to say to the prosecution here, look at it, just look at it, have another look and see where they should be tried.
We never gave up hope, and we are quite positive. And he also said that, no, one day I will come and everything will be fine. And maybe we can only hope, and try we must. And we have been doing our very best. And I said to Babar, I said, I have to go to any corner of the world, if I have to do anything to help you, I'll do that. If you ask me to go at 12 o'clock at night to go to this meeting or that meeting or this conference, that conference, I'll do that.
Neither of them should be in prison. Both of them are damaged. Babar is traumatized by what happened to him at the hands of the police. Talha is a vulnerable individual, just like Gary McKinnon. He can barely survive in what are more benign conditions in Long Lartin, in Worcestershire, how either of them would cope in extreme isolation in America. Well, it's a rhetorical question. They wouldn't. They wouldn't.
Even if we were united, I think we'd still have problems. It's still, even the most hopeful scenario is, and it's the way 5 years of prison would have affected my brother's sense of well-being and his mental state and his sense of hope, and it'd be difficult being employed and married, and so there'll be another set of, but that's, you know, to stay hopeful.
I hope that Allah gives me enough strength that when he comes out, I'm able to greet him smiling.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I think we watched two exceptional films, and I think that understanding the impact of the global war on terror through the eyes of families and people who've been directly affected by the injustices that our criminal justice systems are operating through is a very powerful way of understanding what's going on. And I think now we are going to open up the floor for questions of Farida and Hamja. Victoria is going to translate for Farida. So I will take some questions now. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is for the Farida.
Can you make it loud, please?
Yeah. Do you have a lot of problem getting sympathy and support from the Moroccan human rights infrastructure?
Quels sont les problèmes pour toi d'avoir le support des droits de l'homme, des civilisations des droits de l'homme marocaines?
Quelles sont les difficultés que je rencontre à avoir le support? Mais en fait, les organisations qui soutiennent pour les droits de l'homme au Maroc, elles se penchent sur l'affaire d'Ali, mais ça ne fait absolument pas le poids par rapport au système, au régime marocain. Ça ne fait vraiment pas le poids. Parce qu'il y a
She's saying that the Moroccan human rights organizations support very strongly all the work that she and the family are doing.
Mais ils ne font pas le poids. Donc par rapport
but the problem is they don't really have the weight to make an impact on the regime.
Do you want to follow that up, Farida, with some
Tu veux dire plus sur ça?
Par rapport aux organisations marocaines de droits de l'homme, je pourrais dire que déjà pour les avocats marocains, il est très très difficile de plaider de la même manière que des avocats étrangers, parce que
she's just explaining a bit more that for the Moroccan lawyers, it's very, very difficult for them to have the same weight as foreign lawyers would have if they were before the Moroccan court.
Et ça sans tenir compte du fait que déjà le jugement, la plaidoirie et toutes les audiences qui ont lieu ne servent relativement à rien, vu que, comme l'avait dit Luc donc dans le documentaire, c'est comme si tout était déjà décidé, planifié.
Yeah, she's saying that the real problem is that it's almost as though the court cases are completely pointless, because from the very beginning it's quite clear what the outcome is going to be and that everything has been decided before they even get into the court.
I wonder, Farida, would you mind talking a little bit about Ali and the whole process that you as a family have been through? Ali's experience of detention, arrest, extradition and his torture.
Est-ce que tu peux parler du point de vue de la famille et d'Ali lui-même, un peu des expériences de ces années depuis qu'il a été arrêté la première fois.
Je vais parler essentiellement de Ali pour commencer.
She's going to start by talking about Ali before she talks about the family.
Il a été mis en détention, en isolation totale, donc sensorielle, temporelle, en Espagne.
He was put in complete solitary confinement in his cell in Spain.
Et ça pendant 2 ans, 8 mois et demi.
2 years, 8.5 months.
Il a dû développer des capacités de pouvoir se maintenir en vie parce qu'il disait que ça le poussait à devenir fou. Le fait de ne pas avoir quelqu'un avec qui dialoguer.
He had to really find a way to hold himself together because right from the beginning he said in these conditions it's really difficult not to go mad, but he found those ways.
Donc comme il n'y avait aucun contact humain, même la nourriture on la lui passait sous la porte, donc par un
He had no human contact whatsoever. Even the food was put through a slot in the door for him.
De ce fait-là, donc il a développé des capacités qui sont les suivantes. Il se parlait à lui-même, donc il dialoguait avec sa propre personne.
He developed this technique of talking to himself and making a dialogue with himself.
Ouais, il devait se toucher, c'était très important pour lui de se toucher.
And he also touched himself, he touched his body.
Et donc, il a aussi fait des tentatives pendant ces 2 ans, 8 mois et demi. Il a fait en tout 3 grèves de la faim.
During this period, the 2 years and 8.5 months, he did 3 hunger strikes.
Donc c'était le seul moyen qui lui restait de se battre de l'intérieur de la prison, de dénoncer ces discriminations et de réclamer qu'il était innocent. Donc réclamer justice.
These hunger strikes were the only technique he had to affirm his innocence and to be able to fight from inside the prison.
Lors de la 3e grève de la faim, donc il a commencé alors qu'il avait appris qu'il allait être extradé. Donc le Conseil des ministres espagnol avait décidé de son extradition au Maroc.
During the 3rd hunger strike, he heard that the Spanish had decided that the extradition would go through.
Et il était à 26 jours de grève de la faim lorsqu'il a été extradé.
He was on the 26th day of the hunger strike.
Donc on ajoute à ces 26 jours les 12 jours de garde à vue au cours desquels il a été sauvagement torturé.
And if you add on to that the 12 days when he had been held at the beginning and really savagely tortured.
Alors pendant ces 12 jours, c'est 12 jours de torture intensive, jour et nuit avec un relais, donc on ne le permet pas de dormir.
During the torture, he was tortured both in the day and the night, and there was a changing of the guards to torture him, but he never had a single space in between. The torture was intensive and continued.
Et donc le moyen utilisé par ces tortionnaires de le garder debout, on ne va pas dire que c'était pour le remettre en forme, mais juste pour le garder éveillé, c'était de lui injecter des produits dans les veines.
In order to keep him awake during that period when he was not allowed to sleep, they injected him with some substances that he doesn't know what it was.
Ali m'a décrit que la sensation qu'il avait lors de ces piqûres, c'était le remettre donc à l'état d'une sorte de zombie. Il devenait fou, il avait l'impression que tout allait exploser en lui.
He explained to Farida, described the feeling of what happened when these injections were made to him, and it made him feel a bit like a zombie, going slightly mad, and he just was almost like exploding inside.
Pour donner juste quelques détails pour qu'ils aient une idée de comment est-ce que le Maroc torture, et c'est répétitif, c'est similaire pour quasi tous les cas de personnes qui sont en
She's
garde
just
à vue.
emphasizing that as is it's routine in this Moroccan torture that these same techniques are used all the time on people.
Donc c'est de les accrocher par les mains, donc avec des cordes, on les accroche comme ça.
And they one thing is with the hands are tied like this at the wrist.
Et on les pend donc au plafond.
And hung from the ceiling.
Et pendant ce temps-là, ils sont à 16. Donc Ali a compté 16 gardes. Et ils étaient à 16 à les frapper avec des très très gros bâtons. Partout dans le corps.
They're beaten in this position.
On change de position, on le pend par les pieds également. Et on
Sometimes it's upside down and he's hung up by his feet and equally beaten in the same way.
Il y a les tentatives de noyade, donc on va le noyer jusqu'à ce qu'il tombe dans l'inconscience et on le réveille.
There are these attempts to drown him, putting his head into a bucket of water.
Il y a les brûlures par des cigarettes au niveau des parties intimes.
And then there's cigarette burns all over his private parts.
L'électrocution aussi au niveau des parties intimes.
And electric shocks, similarly.
Il y a le viol anal à l'aide de bouteilles.
And he's also sodomized with a bottle.
Je crois que je vais arrêter à ce moment-là.
C'est assez, hein? Pour le moment,
Perhaps I'll move on to Hamja. If you wouldn't mind saying a few words, Hamja, before we then open it up for questions.
Thank you all for coming. I didn't think as many people would turn up. I mean, the first time I watched that film, which you've just seen, was the day before the European Court of Human Rights issued their very negative verdict. Can't explain how devastating that was for my family. And also prior to that, I sort of when I did the interview for that film, I thought, oh, this is like the worst interview I've ever done in my life. But subsequently, I realised it's a space I could actually be vulnerable, and I couldn't be in Al Jazeera and CNN and whoever was interviewing us at the time. Dalla's now obviously been extradited, so every disturbing thing Gareth describes and everything she says she'll be disappointed about and everything I said I've had nightmares about is his current situation. Yeah, Dalla's in pre-trial isolation. His trial has been moved forward from October this year to March next year. So he's spent 7 years now, 7 years in July the 19th in detention without trial, and at least like about a year and a half in pre-trial solitary confinement. There's a lot of current campaign around Guantanamo Bay, especially with the hunger strike there. But there's precedents within, I mean, all these horrific prisons are like Guantanamo Bay, and Abu Ghraib are extensions of the domestic supermax system within the United States. I mean, I'm talking every procedure. Let's take forced feeding, which occurs in prisons like ADX Florence, forced cell extraction, which effectively means gassing a cell out till someone chokes nearly to death to remove them, is practiced. Normally, there are 80,000 people in solitary confinement in the United States. Bradley Manning's treatment is not unusual in any respect at all. So I think we need to take any campaigning against closure of Guantanamo further, since these things have precedents. I take a lot of strength from a very British trajectory of family campaigns that, you know, which might include Hillsborough, Jana Alder, who's campaigned for her brother for 14 years, who was murdered or killed by police in custody. Even the miners' strike and things like that. Because really, they're the ones who protect civil liberties and government accountability for us all. And, you know, there's a few things we have as families which our political representatives do not have. The first one being courage, and I cannot think of many MPs who possess that. I will make an exception for Caroline Lucas, who actually spoke at our first event with state crime initiative, and has always paid tribute to their families' courage, even within Parliament. And another thing we have is loyalty. We'll always stick by our family members, and we're not going to sell out basic civil liberties or centuries worth of civil liberties since Magna Carta and habeas corpus just for a convenient military alliance or just for a friendship such as the Blair-Bush era and declaration of infinite war. And another thing we have is longevity and sort of persistence. The Hillsborough family lost at the European Court of Human Rights, which is not something we even remember very well. In the current climate, David Cameron and Theresa May, who all boasted about and were pleased about what happened to my brother, such as at the Conservative Party conference this year, where Theresa May said, "Wasn't it great to say goodbye to those 4 others?" There's, should we withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights? And in reaction, we as progressive people or justice-seeking people, stand by the European Court of Human Rights, but we should really be critical friends, given that they have legitimised supermax isolation, in my brother's judgment. Funny enough, when Julian Assange's attorney spoke, Michael Ratner, who's another of the Centre for Constitutional Rights, and he was asked, why doesn't Julian take his case to the European Court of Human Rights? And the case he actually referred to was our case, as in Edward Fitzgerald, who represented my brother at some points, who's part of Doherty Street Chambers and also representing Gary McKinnon, says this European judgment effectively, attempts to challenge American prison conditions, which are some of the worst in the world, and are effectively not going to be effective anymore. I'd like to say something hopeful. Talha still maintains his sense of humour. There's a particular healing effect a prisoner has on the family. So when my parents went to visit Talha, it'd be him who'd comfort my mother and father and even counsel me. That aspect has been removed, and all phone calls are monitored, so there's no privacy anymore. All letters are monitored too. There's a mailing list going around somewhere and a card to Talha, and I can't sort of emphasize the importance of writing to prisoners, so please do all sign it. I don't know what to say to finish. Well, Talha said to his family on his final family visit, which was horrifically painful for my mum and my father. I'm a sturdy ship of justice and a sea of overwhelming injustice, which is a nice way to remember his courage and dignity.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just inviting Arun and Luk to join the panel, and I would welcome some more questions of Farida and Hamja, if you have them, and I will expect Luk and Arun to chip in, and then they will also make contributions. Are there any more questions? Here and then over here.
I just wanted to ask, how can you still have faith in the European Court of Human Rights, and everybody here, how can you still have faith in the European Court of Human Rights when they didn't even spell your brother's name right in the final judgment?
Yeah, so just to clarify, in the first judgment in April last year, they called my brother, whose name is Saeed, which is probably one of the most common Muslim names, as Selya, which was then repeated in all the press and publicity, and then did that again when the case went to the Grand Chamber. When a case goes to the Grand Chamber, you can't add any additional facts to the case, and 95% of cases fell. But there was one positive thing that came out of the European Court of Human Rights, which is the judgment on Harun Aswat, which was given earlier this year. So Harun Aswat suffers from severe schizophrenia, and my brother actually witnessed his mental breakdown in Long Lartin when he stopped consuming food and dropped the Quran to the floor, and he's in Broadmoor at the moment. So he won his European Court judgment. But within the crossfire, so you get right-wing organisations like the Heritage Foundation, within the crossfire of criticism that comes from right-wing sources, you do actually have some sort of residue of truth. So, you know, they point out how hypocritical it is, because in Harun Aswat's judgment, there's acknowledgement of the force feeding, which is occurring in Guantanamo right now, which goes against all medical ethics and international law. So that's perfectly fine for an ordinary prisoner, of course not. And I still think we should stand by the sort of, there's no way Britain should unilaterally withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights. And Janet Older, who's actually speaking with me next month as a special guest for my brother's anniversary, she challenged the deaths in custody and got the government to admit they were wrong, which is a great thing. But I think all these pressures from the Conservative government to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights, which they've admitted would be devastating, are what in effect produce bargaining chips or erroneous judgments too.
Thank you. Woman over here.
I just wanted to ask about, because we know the US prison system is based on the profit motive, and I'm new to this, so I was not aware of supermax until I met you at the ISCI a week ago. So I just wonder what American US doctors' organisations are saying about supermax. And I mean, obviously we know that torture is illegal, but that doesn't seem to matter. But I just wondered how doctors in the US are relating to people held under these conditions, if there's 80,000 of them.
Yeah, there's lots of doctors and psychiatrists. If you go to the website Solitary Watch, I did my first event with State Crime Initiative last month. Some of the same people here, so I'm sorry to repeat myself. You go to Solitary Watch or Sharon Shavlev, who's an expert based at LSE, who'll provide you with all the sources for. There's a lot of religious campaign and multi-faith religious campaigning against solitary confinement in the United States. It was actually the press about the European Court judgment was absolutely really good within the United States. The best article was probably in The Nation called "A European Court Gives a Green Light to Torture" by Jean Theo Harris, which you can all Google and find online, which is probably the best critique. And another article written in the New Statesman recently by Dr. Ian Patel of International State Crime Initiative called "The Impossible Justice of Talha's Extradition," which you'll find online if you just Google New Statesman Talha, which talk about all the politics. So it was 26 human rights organisations within the United States, including Human Rights First, which is a really mainstream, even slightly pro-Obama human rights NGO, Centre for Constitutional Rights, which is a lot better. It's quite a radical NGO, but was absolutely brilliant and is essential reading. And American Civil Liberties Union being the biggest, they all objected to the European Court judgment. And there's plenty of good writing, whether in the British context there was this figure called Abu Hamza and the Others, which the Home Office just invented to smear everyone, even though there were separate cases. There's ample material. And the most strenuous campaigns against solitary confinement are actually within America itself, which most people here aren't really aware of. So, and some of them are fantastically creative. So you have Tam's Year 10, which was a group of artists who would write to prisoners in solitary with images of landscapes they'd like to see and so forth. And they actually ended up getting the supermax prison closed. And states like Maine have closed supermax prison solitary confinement by up to about 65%. Under international law guidelines, it is actually wrong. So the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, Juan Mendes, tried to intervene and say to the UK government, you're effective. Things like SAMS and pre-trial solitary do amount to torture. The UK government just chose not to listen to them. I mean, and it's the same guy, Juan Mendes, has visited Ali Aarrass in prison in Morocco, which Farida would probably tell you about in more depth. But the one thing you have to give credit to the Moroccan thing I don't like to is that at least they gave him the right to visit the actual prison. The United States actually barred him from visiting supermax prisons in the United States, and they also barred Amnesty International from thing. At the front there, I've got an excellent, sorry to talk so long, report, which you can just pick up there for free, which is Amnesty International's report on supermax prisons in California. So just pick that up, and it's amply full of sources and academic sources. So sorry to.
Arun, if you'd like to come in on that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Hamja said is absolutely right about the kind of energy around the prisons issue generally in the US, and a lot of different kinds of campaign groups and different kinds of communities are coming together. Especially over the last 2 years, I was at a meeting in Riverside Church in New York towards the end of last year. I would say it was about 1,000 people coming to hear people talking about how we can abolish prisons in the United States. So there is a lot of energy around it. You know, the supermax is a normal part of American prisons. It's not an exceptional thing for so-called terrorist cases. And if you've read an amazing book by someone called Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, you can then you can understand that what's happening in the United States with the criminal justice system is you know, a form of institutional racism that perpetuates the long history of segregation and slavery in the United States. You know, amongst the people who are being held in the supermaxes that are designated for you know, suspected terrorists are people like Jamil Al-Amin, who's formerly known as H.Rap Brown, former leader of the Black Panther Party and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee from the 1960s, right? So there's continuities there going back to you know, COINTELPRO, the counter-subversion program against black nationalism and the civil rights movement. And people are beginning to understand these connections now, right? You know, it was meant to be that after 9/11, it was a new era, new enemies, but people are understanding that actually this is a continuation. There's continuities between the experience of African Americans, between the experience of Latinos, the experience of American Muslims, and Muslims who've been extradited from other parts of the world. We're seeing the same kind of thing around very strong campaigning now around the New York Police Department, which has had this very intense policy of surveillance of American Muslims in the city, where pretty much every mosque had an informant, and there was all kinds of entrapments going on. Now people are understanding that the racism that informs those kinds of policies is the same kind of racism that informs the hugely discriminatory stop and frisk policies that the New York Police Department has, where something like 90% of the people who are stopped and frisked are African American or Latino. Right? So these connections are beginning to be made, and I think that's very positive.
Thanks very much, Arun. Before I come back to the questions, I know I've got a couple of people on the call list. I wonder, Farida, could you update us on the Mendes report, Mendes' visit to Ali and the report? I think that would be very helpful following on from what Hamja's just said.
Peut-être juste préciser avant de parler du rapport, c'est de dire que nous, au niveau du ministère des Affaires étrangères ou du consul ou de l'ambassade belge, il n'y a jamais eu aucun soutien d'aucune sorte. Jamais, depuis le départ.
She just wants to clarify that from the Belgian authorities, there's never been any attempt to make any kind of support or démarche of any sort for Ali or for the family.
Ça va donc du début de sa détention, donc en 2008, quand il a été mis en détention, on avait demandé à ce qu'on s'inquiète sur son sort. La Belgique disait on ne fera pas d'ingérence à la justice espagnole.
So in 2008, they made the first demand for a Belgian going to look into his case, and they said absolutely not.
Un peu plus tard, donc en 2009, Ali commençait sa première grève de la faim. Les autorités belges, de nouveau, ils disaient on n'interviendra pas. Les conditions de détention en Europe tout entière se sont améliorées. Donc on n'intervient pas.
So in 2009, in the second hunger strike, again they said, no question, we're not getting involved in this at all.
Entre toutes ces dates donc de demande d'intervention, c'était toujours les mêmes réponses qui se poursuivaient. Donc on n'interviendra pas.
Donc so she's just saying that each time it was exactly the same response. We're not going to get involved.
Même à la veille donc de son extradition, alors qu'on était en train de brûler vif tellement on était inquiet par cette extradition. Les autorités belges nous disaient toujours on n'interviendra pas.
Even on the evening before his actual extradition was about to take place, when she said the family were burning with the horror of it all, the Belgian response was exactly the same as it had been in all the previous years. It's nothing to do with us, we're not making any intervention.
Une fois extradé au Maroc, on a redemandé donc l'intervention de la Belgique. Alors c'était on ne torture pas au Maroc, il aura droit à un jugement équitable et de toute manière il se trouve dans le pays de sa deuxième nationalité et donc on n'interviendra pas.
And it was the same. Once he was in Morocco, the Belgian response was he'll have a fair trial in Morocco, there's no torture in Morocco, and in any case, he's now in the country of his second nationality, it's nothing to do with us, there's no way we can intervene.
Et au mois de septembre 2012, les avocats de Ali ont su qu'il y avait Juan Mendes qui faisait une tournée donc, dans les différentes prisons au Maroc.
So in 2012, Ali's lawyers discovered that Juan Mendes was in the area.
Et ils ont demandé donc à Juan Mendes de se pencher sur l'affaire de Ali Aarrass et donc a accepté d'aller lui rendre visite et se sont entretenus pendant 1h30.
And they asked him if he would intervene. And in fact, Juan Mendes was able to spend an hour and a half talking to him.
Alors, il était accompagné d'un médecin légiste indépendant.
And he had with him a doctor who was like a legal doctor and who was accompanying Mendes.
Donc, ils ont établi un rapport médical complet qui déterminait à quel point donc, Ali avait subi des tortures.
It was this doctor who did the complete examination of Ali and was able to establish in a professional way exactly how he had been tortured.
Et en comparaison, donc au niveau psychique, il comparait les séquelles d'après la torture avec d'autres cas qu'il avait vus dans d'autres régions du Maroc et avec qui Ali n'avait aucune connaissance.
And this doctor was able to make a comparison of the effects that Ali had suffered and compare them with other cases that he'd visited in various other prisons in Morocco, cases that had nothing to do with Ali and Ali wouldn't have known anything about, and found the completely parallel results of the torture.
Voilà. Donc maintenant, nous avons un rapport qui est établi par Juan Mendes, qui est un rapporteur spécial sur la torture et les maltraitances de l'ONU. Mais malgré ça, on reçoit toujours comme réponse, après l'avoir envoyé au ministère des Affaires étrangères belge, que nous n'aurons pas d'intervention. Et maintenant, la réponse est, si nous intervenons pour le cas d'Ali Aarrass, nous devrions intervenir pour tous les autres cas des Belgo-Marocains, et nous ne pouvons pas faire cela.
And despite the Belgian government having been given this full United Nations legal and medical report, they've still completely refused to intervene. And in fact, they went so far as to say, if we were to intervene and take account of this one case, we would then have to for all the dual nationalities, Belgian, Moroccans, and we're not going to start opening that door.
Voilà, ça juste pour dire que nous sommes soumis à une sorte de non-volonté de la part de nos autorités et qui nous font comprendre qu'on est soumis, comme on l'a dit au documentaire, aux lois de 2 poids 2 mesures. Si on s'appelle Ali ou Mohamed, eh bien, on ne fait pas partie des Belges.
So she says, you know, as you saw in the film, what she knows that Ali and her whole family are subject to is the completely different weight given to Belgians who are called Mohammed or Ali to ones who are called Jane or Sarah.
Mais voilà, juste pour finir avec une petite pointe positive, c'est qu'on a un comité de soutien qui est très très important et que on n'arrête pas cette lutte. On a les amis de Ali que je remercie infiniment de nous soutenir ici, donc de Londres. Et on n'arrêtera pas parce que, comme le dit Ali, du fin fond de sa prison, si je pouvais faire quelque chose, je le ferais. Malheureusement, je suis entre 4 murs, Mais je sais que j'ai autour de moi tous des soldats qui se battent pour que justice me soit rendue, moi et d'autres cas, parce qu'il ne faut pas oublier qu'il y a pire que Ali dans ces géoles marocaines, et il y pense lui aussi. Et donc on ne lâchera pas prise. Ali se porte bien moralement, et c'est grâce à tout ce soutien qui lui est apporté de l'extérieur.
So she wants to end on a positive note by saying a very big thank you to all the friends who have supported their campaign here in London. And they have a very, very strong support group in Belgium. And Ali himself has a very high morale, and he says, here I am stuck between four walls and I can't do anything, but I can keep strong, and it's because of knowing I'm completely surrounded by all these people who support me. And so both her and he and all the group want to thank everybody very much for their support.
I'd like to ask Luk actually to say something about, because Luk is in fact the founder of the Ali Aarrass campaign and has done, and with Farida, and has done a tremendous job. And I think it would be very valuable to hear about the nature of the campaign, because that's where we can all be involved. I mean, you know, we can come to lectures and we can watch films, but really it mustn't end there. It shouldn't end there. We have a responsibility to Talha Ahsan, we have a responsibility to Ali Aarrass. And I think Luk is an absolutely wonderful example of taking that outside the realms of being a viewer.
Well, I would just like to join myself to what Farida said, and thank you all. A bit emotional about it, but I think it's very important what we're doing here, because a lot has been written, but creating a popular campaign is something else. So for me, that is the essential thing, because of course, I think even in the opinion of a lot of people, solitary confinement is wrong, etc. But the question is, what are we doing, and what can we do against it? So I think this initiative, for me, it's really something very important, that two campaigns come together, thanks to initiative of International State Crime Initiative, Penny, thanks to Francis, thanks to Liz of the London Friends campaign, and then my dear friend Hamja Ahsan, who I had the luck to meet recently, and it clicked very well. So I think I don't have to repeat all the elements who are joining, you know, in both cases, although they are completely different countries, different cases, but there are different elements that, and for me, what we are doing, dear friends, and I would like to thank you also for your presence, is that we are making a campaign against what I call a new fascism that is invading us, really, and that is coming from the United States, and I'm sorry to offend you, but coming through the UK to the European continent. And so this is what is happening. And now our problem and our question is, let's create a global, for me, a European popular movement that crosses all borders, frontiers of countries, but also frontiers of convictions and opinions, to make this force to resist on what is happening today in this world, and that is illustrated by what Talha has been through, and that was Ali has been through. So just to be short, you know that Belgium is a very little country. You know it maybe from Bruges and Antwerp and maybe Brussels, because it's the capital of Europe. But it's a very, very small country. So let's say that this very small country is a bit on the crossroads in Europe between what they call the Anglo-Saxon model and the French kind. So it's just crossroads. So that makes it interesting. And it's interesting as well because all the European institutions are there, and also NATO is there, so which makes it very interesting for all secret services, for all police and everything. I can assure you, it's, I don't say it's as bad as in London, but it is a situation that is very followed up. Now, there is a little, what I call a little community from Moroccan origin, Muslim, that has been the target of the anti-terror campaign launched since 2001 by Bush. That is what has happened. That this community has been targeted since 10 years. And, you know, Belgium before the war in Iraq was what Rumsfeld called member of the old Europe. You had the UK, was the modern Europe, and then you had the French, the Germans, and the Belgians, who were the old Europe, who didn't want to walk into the war just like that. Now, there was a turning point in this being old Europe when Belgium joined fully the American war on terror by sending its troops to Afghanistan, not to Iraq, but to Afghanistan, and by participating in every American campaign since then. So let's say that it started late, 2002, 2003, but Belgium, you can say, surrendered totally and changed completely of position in the war on terror. That is a basic point. A second point is that Belgium was criticized by a lot of countries of being the weak, how you call it, the shackle in a chain, in the struggle against terror on the inside, on the interior front. Because they said you are guilty of sending people who are parting to countries like Afghanistan or Pakistan, etc., and with false papers, etc. So Belgium was seen as not doing enough in the war on terror on the interior front, and so I should say that you had Belgium joining the war on terror with the Americans. And for the struggle on the interior front, it was joining with Morocco, you know, because the vast majority of the most important immigrant group in Belgium is the Moroccan population, people from Moroccan origin. So, and there is the link with Morocco, you know. So, and that is where Ali comes in, that you had a joint venture between Belgium and Morocco in what I should call the war on terror on the interior front. You know that Belgium organized a lot of court cases against so-called terrorists who were living in Belgium and who were accused by Morocco of being undermining the state in Morocco. That's one. And they didn't hesitate to use evidence obtained under torture to use it in Belgian courts. They were convicted by that by the European Court recently. So that's one thing. The court cases against a number of what they call terrorists who were accused by Morocco of undermining the regime. That's one thing. And another point is that inside Morocco, the war on terror launched by the Americans was the welcome occasion to crush every opposition that existed in Morocco. And since the 2003 bombing in Casablanca, I can tell you the number. It's an official number quoted by Amnesty International, saying that thousands of people were arrested, hundreds of them were tortured, and it is this campaign since 2003 that is still going on. And every 6 months, there is another so-called, well, I say, terror case, where the secret services are proving their necessity and so on. And it is in that process that Ali has been caught as well, with hundreds of other people. So this is a bit the case that we're working in. And so I should say, the old problem is how to create a campaign against what is clearly an infraction and say the Convention of Genève, the Convention against torture, they all put it aside in name of this war on terror. And, well, about campaigning, and then I'll cut it, and then you interrupt me. We went 20 times to Morocco. Farida, an old group, we mobilized every time to assist to the court and go to the court. I think we need to do that, even if it's in America or wherever. We have to mobilize money, mobilize people, personalities with a name that can make it in the media to go and assist the court case. It's absolutely important, I think, to do that. We were very happy when people from London, like Francis, Penny, Liz, and others, came and joined us in Morocco, because I can tell you it made some effect in the media and in the court. It's surely something that has to be done. So that's one thing we did. I think for us, the key of all the campaign is the family. Is Farida, is Sarah, is his wife. It's the key of the campaign. And every campaigner puts him around the family. They are the key and the heart of the campaign. And I think it's very important, because through the family, you fight the dehumanization, yeah? They try to use against us, making us numbers, terrorists, whatever. Through the image of Farida, her brother gets his humanity. Through what Hamja and his father says, we recreate the humanity of the one they locked up, and they don't want to let us speak. I think it's extremely important, and that all the specialists, the lawyers, and every campaigner puts himself in service of the family and around the family to support them. I think this is, for us, essential. Another thing that for us was important was that we tried to mobilize largely, not locking ourselves up only into the Muslim community, although we worked there very intensively. But we were open to the outside world, let's say, and trying to get support from everyone that could be touched by what happened. I think it's very important, because when they can lock you up, well, they can crush you as well, and they can destroy you. So we have tried to have this openness on all levels, and I will stop here.
That's great.
Thanks,
Luke. That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I know time's getting on, but I'm happy for us to continue until at least 8:45. I've got three from the three people who are going to speak from the audience at the moment. Francis, a chap back here, and I think Amanda, who is a lawyer who works on the deprivation of citizenship, which actually ties in very well with the recent comments. So Francis, no? Okay, Amanda.
Just picking up from what Hamja was saying about the subversion of the rule of law, because that's effectively what we're dealing with in the name of the war on terror. What's happening in the UK concerning, I think, can you all hear me? Yes. Yeah. Concerning, oh, is it? Oh, sorry. For the, deprivation of citizenship has taken on a completely new complexion post 9/11. What now the government has a power to impose is effectively summary exile of people born British. Of course, the people that this is happening to largely are people about whom allegations are made. They're Muslims largely, and they're people about whom allegations are made, merely allegations, concerning support for terrorism or even just extremist views, and the kind of evidence that gets adduced in open, because you'll be aware that most of the evidence is enclosed, is stuff like port stops where people are asked, do you support the war in Afghanistan, that sort of thing. And that's the level of the open evidence. But what actually happens is that the decision to deprive you of your citizenship is taken, it's then sat on, and the Secretary of State doesn't serve it until you leave the UK. Now, because through a sleight of hand change to a schedule to one of the acts in 2004, there was a removal of the suspensive right of appeal. So now the government can make a decision to deprive you of your citizenship, serve it at an address where they know you are not because you're under surveillance and you're outside the country, then the next day serve with a signed order depriving you of your citizenship with the effect that you are no longer a British citizen and exclude you from returning to the UK, cancel your passport, alert the airlines that you're not to be carried. Now, in the case of at least 2 people to whom this has been done, they've then been droned. And I'm talking about Bilal al-Bajawi and Mohamed Ouachen. So the consequences are that you become a human rights free zone. Or you can be rendered to the states like Mahdi Hashi was, you might have read about. This is shocking. It's appalling. People don't know a lot about it because very few people are currently affected, the numbers in the 20s. But what they're doing is seeing what they can get away with. And so far they're getting away with it.
Thank you very much. Yes, Hamja, would you like to respond very quickly?
So I just met Helena Kennedy recently, who's visited Mahdi Hashi, who she just mentioned, in prison. She just said it's absolutely horrific. I have attended a lot of Mahdi Hashi meetings because of. But the thing I'd like to say is that even citizenship itself isn't such a great protection. When I toured that film across the UK. And people used to say, well, I feel scared because I used to have a British passport and I used to think it gave me some status and protection, you know, and it doesn't really. You know, the very first duty of government is supposed to be to protect its own citizens. But in between, you know, some citizens are deemed more citizens than others. And racism isn't just about people calling you horrible words like the EDL. It's sort of also about a neglectant state. So, you know, when no action is taken for Janet Alder's brother, that's racism. When the timidity in which we don't bring British nationals home from Guantanamo Bay and British residents is racism too. And the fact that boast about sending a British citizen to prolonged and indefinite solitary confinement too.
My name is Salem Mamon. I belong to an organisation for campaign against criminalising communities, and we've been campaigning against the anti-terror laws since year 2000. So, really, the issue that we have in this country is the terror laws. There are 5 or 6 of them. Are so complex, but they are draconian powers that people don't realise. And deprivation is one of them, and we need to become more aware of what these laws are, what they do. I shan't, in fact, go on further on the digression. All I want to say is that I applaud the families, the 3 families who are here, for what they've done. You really must keep it up. But then I echo what Luk says. We had to build a popular campaign. And I remember when hearing about these families, I remember Muazzam Beg's family as well. We were campaigning for the release of Muazzam Beg, and that from Guantanamo. And my argument is the decision to release the Guantanamo residents were political decisions, they're not legal decisions. We were enough in strength to, in fact, campaign for it, to put pressure on the government, you know, night and day. And then the Labour government moved, Muazzam was released. And that was a political decision. So it has to be a political campaign as well to release them across Europe, whatever. Now, very simply to ask the panel, can they suggest some practical actions that people present here, there are so many people that can take, really, we can take away from the meeting, and there should be practical action they need to take away, so we can all work within our communities, within our workplaces, within our organizations, and we shouldn't make an assumption that people are not part of organizations, whether Liberty or Amnesty, who can become active in that. So please, can the panel suggest some practical actions?
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to respond immediately from the panel? Because I know I'm going to ask Ms. Fakiti to end on precisely that note. So if you want to make a specific contribution, please do now.
Did you say there was an event?
So I'd just like to Yeah, as I said, Talha's 7th anniversary, if you can call it that, of his detention without trial is on the 19th of July, and we do a special event every year. It's not a celebration of being detained without trial, but I guess there's level of strength and endurance which can inspire others outside, and it will be held at Rich Mix at 6:30, venue 2, and the guests are A.L. Kennedy, Janet Older, and Ava Vidal so far, and many others. I'd just like to say some positive news, which is that a film, a very short film called Dinner Time was made recently, and it's just about my mum and dad having dinner, actually, and with the absence of a loved one. And I do recommend reading everyone here buying Victoria's book, which my mum's not here, but it describes her pain in more depth, and all the other families affected. And it just won the Channel 4 First Pitch Award. So we've won a prestigious prize for a documentary made about Talha, and it'll be first screened at this event on the 19th. So do all come along.
That's terrific. Thank you, Hamja. And if you all feed into us on our website, the International State Crime Initiative website, statecrime.org, everything will be up on our website in terms of events. Are there any final questions of the panel? I know it's hot and it's been a long evening, so I want to hand over to Liz Verkeete, who's going to address precisely your question, and we'll finish up with Liz before I wander.
Well, I'm here as London Friends of Ali Aarrass, and we've been going for a number of years now, and I think the first thing I want to say is that everybody here is London Friends of Ali Aarrass, is friends of Hamja, and I think we can do things in our student unions, in our workplaces. We can arrange other screenings of this film. So it's a bit of a kind of I Spartacus moment, I think. But secondly, what I want to say, echoing what Saleh and Luke said about popular movement, but a kind of campaign that crosses borders and links us to the States, to UK, to Belgium, has to start from small beginnings. And the small beginning is always money. I think Hamja and Farida never ever wanted to talk about the cost of this. Now, I know we've got people here, some of my really good friends from Joint Enterprise Not Guilty by Association, from Progressing Prisoners Maintaining Innocence, fighting for prisoners' rights in this country, and how their families suffer with visits to see their loved ones in prison. But can you imagine what it's like for Farida and Hamja? Farida's been, her family have been 20 times to Morocco. The family have paid for it out of their pocket with the support of the campaign. The campaign have raised that money every time. And we're talking about a family coming from Spain and from Belgium, and we're talking about paying the fees of Spanish, Belgian and Moroccan lawyers. It's totally phenomenal. And likewise for Hamja wanting to go to the States, the family needs support. So there will be a collection, gold watches, any jewellery, loose change, anything. I've got a plastic bag somewhere to take the money. The other thing is that the DVD, Ali Aarrass, for example, is for sale, and it's only £5, which I think is, I've been trying to tell them in Belgium, come on, that is so little. So we've got loads here, and just re-echoing that point about we are all Ali Aarrass. I mean, Aisha Manier, who's in the audience, is part of our campaign. She did the subtitling for this film, you know, and absolutely nobody charged for anything to make that film, so terribly thankful to her. Finally, I would say in terms of what you can do, I mean, Luk, Farida, Mohamed, who made the film, they're actually here till Wednesday. They leave 7 o'clock on Wednesday. If anyone wants to spend some time, and Sarah as well, she's a bit fed up of being with us old fogies as well. So if there's any young sisters who want to sort of take her around, you know, that would be gratefully appreciated as well. So they're here for Wednesday, so if you want to fix up anything with them, just come and talk to them afterwards. Finally, tomorrow, at 11:30, a delegation of us are going to the Belgian embassy, where we're handing in a letter which has been signed by 50 MPs, Queen's Councils, academics. We're handing it into the embassy. Now, other people, you know, I'm not talking, some people go on pub crawls. The 3 Ali Aarrass go on embassy crawls. We've been to the Spanish embassy where Penny had a very interesting 30-minute discussion with a security guard about not accepting torture, because that's as far as we were allowed to get. The Spanish embassy is like, and I really admired you for that, because I couldn't be bothered, but you were going to win him round. She was great. Then we went to the Moroccan embassy where we handed in a letter and they literally opened the door, snatched the letter and banged it shut. And tomorrow we're going to the Belgian embassy, and unbelievably, they have agreed to meet with us, with our delegation. And this is a really incredible situation, because nobody from the Belgian government will meet with the sister of a man who's been tortured, but because they think that we are important people, which we are, we're pretending we are, they say they'll meet with us. They've asked us for the name of who's going on the delegation, and we've told them that we want Farida to be part of the delegation. So we're going to see what happens there. We're meeting the people who are going to the delegation at 11 o'clock at Hyde Park Tube Station. Anyone who wants to come, because there'll be a static protest outside, either get to the Hyde Park at 11 and join us, or try to get to the embassy for 11:15, 11:30, and stand outside. Should be interesting. Thank you. Is there anything I've forgotten?
No, that's oh! Thank you very much, and thank you, Liz. Well, I think I want to thank you all again very much for coming. It's been very warm, but I think that the 2 films and the panel discussion was absolutely worth it. I want also to thank Turab Shah and Mohamed Ouachen for their marvellous films. You're sort of hiding in the background, and you haven't had a presence. So if you could both stand up, I think we should very much applaud. You should stand up, Turab. Because without these films, campaigning is so much the harder. If you have a film, we can have a session such as this evening to bring people together. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you've both made them. Thank you very much on behalf of the campaigns and behalf of the families. Again, thank you very, very much to the families of Talha Ahsan and Ali Aarrass. We are so grateful that you could join us this evening. And I urge you all to join both campaigns and really do something to get both these men out of the horrendous prison situations in which they find themselves abroad. Thank you all very much on the panel, to Luke, to Farida, to Arun, to Hamja. We're extremely grateful for you coming and presenting this evening, and we wish you the very, very best for your families. Thank you all again. If you wish to speak to anyone on the panel, please pop down now. I think we can draw it to a close. Thanks very much. Bye.